Max Browne is a former college quarterback and analyst for ESPN, and he runs a very popular, informative, and entertaining YouTube channel. And he's joining us for the second time this year on the Heisman Trophy podcast. Welcome, Max.
It's great to be back, Chris. Thanks for having me.
To start out, you just helped call last weekend's Cal-Stanford game, won by the Cardinal 31-10, and now Justin Wilcox has been fired. You were around the program for a few days last week. Who do you think the Bears will look at to replace him?
Yeah, I was surprised Wilcox was let go. I thought, I wasn't naive to the realities of the situation he was in, but the storyline heading into that game was, hey, Cal beats their rival, and then if they can finish off versus SMU, there was a world where they had 8 wins, and that was the most in the Wilcox era, which is maybe part of the problem with this, in that, Cal's unique in that they've never bottomed out. They've consistently been just a average football team, and average has a negative connotation, but like a lot of these other teams, especially in the ACC, under Wilcox, they never bottomed out, and Wilcox had to deal with so much during his tenure there, from pandemic to conference change to NIL and trying to get a fan base to, support him more financially and all that. But to answer your direct question, to me, there's one name which is unique for Cal that I think is, other fan bases are having to, there's not that clear-cut one name per se. I guess for LSU and Florida, it might be Lane Kiffin. But for Cal, Tosh Lupoy makes so much sense. I mean, he's the current Oregon defensive coordinator. Before that was Nick Saban's linebacker coach, and I believe defensive coordinator at Alabama. I know when I played Alabama in 2016, I believe that was his title. He recruited me when I was in high school, when he was at Cal, and that's how he made his money. Was a big-time recruiter there. And then Sark poached him to Washington, and then his career took off from there. But he went to De La Salle High School, went to Cal. Like, if Tosh is ever going to make the jump to be a head coach, I think it'd be a home run hire for Cal. And I think there's a world where Tosh could even potentially get a more high-profile job if he wanted to. So, yeah, that's the one name that sticks out.
There's an outstanding freshman quarterback at Cal whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce at this moment. Do you think the Bears can keep him? And is that task number one for the incoming coach, just to try to make a run at him to stay in Berkeley?
Without a doubt, Jaren Kiave Songopolatele is going to be one of, if not the premier quarterback this offseason in the portal. And I don't think it's not going to be just Cal. It's trying to get after him. And I asked Justin Wilcox last week about that in terms of, I literally said, I was like, Coach, I hate that I have to ask this, but are there plans in place? And what's kind of the month of November been like from a retention standpoint for JKS? And his line to me was, this has been going on since fall camp. Like, they knew they had something special before the world did, before he got on the TV screen. And so that's Ron Rivera's job, right? That's the luxury that Cal has in this transition is, yes, you're getting a new head coach, but you're holding on to Ron Rivera. And from what I understand, like, that is his lane. That's why you hire a Ron Rivera. So yeah, whoever the next head coach is, keeping JKS, he is that special. I mean, for a true freshman quarterback, he's that special. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of teams, especially from the Power 2 conferences, that are going to be trying to get him for, I don't think $5 million in a single year is out of range for JKS.
Quite the run for Cal. JKS, Fernando Mendoza, back-to-back years, probably, both future first-round picks. Pretty amazing evaluation efforts on Cal's part. Look, the whole regular season is coming to a close. Looking at the big picture, what for you has been the biggest surprise in the sport this year?
Biggest surprise? That's a good question. Right away, I think the whole LSU scenario. I mean, LSU was my national championship pick before the year started. I thought Garrett Nussmeier was the best quarterback returning in college football. I was believing, hey, Brian Kelly, year 4, the jump that could be there, all they got in the portal, especially after week 1, too, with the win that we thought was a huge win at Clemson. So a little pinpointed, but yeah, LSU's trajectory is the most surprising. And then obviously they're in every headline this week with, hey, what's Lane Kiffin going to do? And I'm intrigued to see what they do if Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, because I do think from a brand name perspective, the coaching market doesn't have those premier hot names, which means some of these schools are going to have to get either creative or take a chance on a true kind of lower level head coach and give them the keys to a big boy program. But yeah, LSU, the whole storyline there is the most intriguing thing to me, or surprising thing.
I'm going to loop back around to Kiffin in a second, but have you noticed any trends this year that might be developing in a sport that just seems to be evolving every year?
Good question. I mean, I'll go super technical with that. And those that follow my content know I watch a lot of film and a lot of film breakdown. I'm fascinated by the intermediate passing game. And here's what I mean by that. I think offenses are dead, or offensive scheme is dead in college
Mm-hmm.
football, in that every offense looks the exact same.
Yes.
Every OC that I meet with, they're all trying to do the same exact stuff for the most part. There's obviously variations here and there. But if you rewind 5, 7 years ago, not that long ago, there were distinct offensive systems that head coaches were going into. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a byproduct of a new generation getting into college football, and you're kind of molding the best from air raid passing attack and best from NFL pro style run game and kind of meshing it all together. But I bring up intermediate passing game in that I have found that a lot of the offenses do just RPOs and then shots down the field. So it's
Mm-hmm.
run pass option kind of thing, and then shots down the field. But the best teams have an intermediate passing game, which was mainstream when I played. I'm talking digs, I'm talking 10-yard outs, I'm talking comebacks consistently over routes. The teams that are average offensively, to me, don't have that. It's just RPOs and shots. The
Yeah.
more elevated offenses have a full-fledged progression passing, intermediate passing game, which is something I'm tracking and trying to work on a YouTube video as well and bring some metrics and stats behind it. But that's one thing that's top of mind for me.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. For me, the most noteworthy thing has been exactly that. There's been a gradual drop off in offensive production. There's not a single Power Four team that is averaging 500 yards of offense per game. Here's a stat for you: the last team to lead the nation in total offense per game at fewer than 500 yards was 1987 Oklahoma. And like
Wow.
you said, these offensive systems have become more homogenous. They've kind of rounded out a bit. There's very few sharp edges. Almost everyone runs this version of the same offense. And have you noticed that we're seeing this return of double tight ends and H backs and fullbacks? We're going back in the phone booth. I know some people have cited the new clock rules, but I'm not sure that tells the whole story. Why do you think that we're seeing this homogenization and this kind of sameness being spread out across college football?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's funny that 12 personnel. I've noticed it. Sean McVay, ever since obviously the Rams are rolling, and Sean McVay, ever since Puka Nacua went down, went heavy into 12 and 13 personnel, and the stats there, check them out. It's literally black and white before and after. And then you look at, I literally was talking with the ESPN research department last week of all right, who are the best teams in college football that are doing that? And Ohio State's right up there. Texas A&M's right up there in terms of usage of 12 and 13 personnel, 2 and 3 tight ends, to your point. USC's up there too, and their offense, I know the team's not doing well, but the offense is playing great. Yeah, I think it's the natural, cat and mouse and evolution of coordinators. And what I mean by that is, I think 10 years ago, it was still defenses trying to catch up with the spacing and the tempo and all that. And then nowadays you see defenses, very, very rarely do I call a game for a defense that has 3 linebackers on the field all 3 downs.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's 2, and then a third safety is the nickel body. That's mainstream now. So I think offense is caught up to the defense is caught up to the athleticism a little bit. And then now the offense's counter there is, how can we get a second tight end on the field to then take advantage of the fact that you're taking defensively a linebacker off the field and
Right.
putting a safety on the field. And it's the natural ebb and flow. And as kids of this generation get a little bit more athletic, I think tight ends, that's a dual capability position where you're
Sure.
big, strong, athletic, and can run as well. And those guys are, I don't know if they're easier to find, but maybe just out there and more visible than they were a decade ago.
Yeah, I feel like you could shake a tree and find a lot of guys who are in that range where they're either a big receiver or a small tight end. And it seems like you said the counter to this, the kind of the chess move counter to having a Caleb Downs hybrid, safety linebacker who which was used to counter all those spread attacks, right?
Totally. And one interesting point, just one last thing on this, and I'm coming off of just calling Stanford and Andrew Luck's program and whatnot. And we were talking about that of hey, what's the future for Stanford football? And they want to get back to heavy personnel groups. We're talking, they're coming into a game with 20 different personnel groups, tons of formations where they're using 6, 7 offensive linemen. That's old school Andrew Luck type of football. The interesting point now, though, is with the transfer portal and so much player movement, it's really hard to install that kind of offense in today's day and age versus the spread kind of, hey, what these guys have been running in 7-on-7 leagues forever and more simplistic run schemes and whatnot, less moving pieces with personnel groups and whatnot. That's easier to install in today's day and age. I think the next evolution is whether it's Stanford, whether it's a school like Michigan State getting back to their roots, Wisconsin getting back to their roots, going more old school, doubling down on 12 and 13 personnel, but more to run the ball and then additional offensive linemen as well. Like whatever offense can get back to that to be different than the rest of the world to give themselves a competitive advantage. I think that's coming.
Yeah, it's really interesting development there. It seems like I know that like in a romantic sense, like a lot of coaches, I think, who grew up in a certain period, a lot of people want to go back to these old styles of play in football, right? And it seems like it's only a matter of time before the fullback comes back as well. So look, it's rivalry week this week. We've got Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Georgia Tech. Got the Egg Bowl, USC, UCLA, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and so on. What underdog in these matchups do you think has the best chance of pulling the upset?
That's a good question. I mean, the whole Mississippi State Egg Bowl thing is fascinating to me, just with all the distractions around Lane Kiffin and what that would mean if Mississippi State went in there and won that game. All three of those games are intriguing to me because if you find a scenario where Michigan beats Ohio State, they have an argument to be in the playoff. They should be in the playoff. A 10-2 team with arguably the best win in the country versus Ohio State, they're in. But if Ole Miss were to lose and then they're 10-2, Vandy beats Tennessee, they're 10-2. There's a scenario where one of these Power 2 programs at 10-2 is on the outside looking in, and that would be chaos, not only in the short term for SEC Big Ten, but I think if that happened, that is not what you want for ACC, Big 12, or Group of 5 moving forward. Because if a 10-2 Big 10 or SEC team gets left off, that'll only allow the conference commissioners to say we got to protect our own and start getting a playoff format where they're saying automatic qualifiers and maybe boxing out the Big 12 and the ACC down the road. So that whole scenario is fascinating to me.
Someone's going to get left out, and someone's going to be very upset about it. This has always been the case in college football, going back to the poll days. Somebody's upset that they weren't voted in. Then you get to the BCS. Someone's upset the computers didn't get them in. Then you get to the 14 playoff, and someone's upset because they're fifth or sixth. And it seems like as we expand the playoff and as we tinker with it, there's always this, like the motive has always seemed to be like, we're going to try to settle this thing, but it never really gets settled, does it?
It never does. And I actually like this format. I know there's a lot of people that don't like the subjectivity piece. I don't mind it. And I've done the mock playoff selection committee, a media member sometimes, get looped into that. I did it in Dallas in September. And I just worry if we go all back to full transparency, I guess I don't mind the transparency, but just data only. I'm not wired that way. I'm a film guy. I'm a watch the tape. Obviously it's important data, but I push back against the people that are data over everything. What's the analytics say? I don't think that's the right way to do it because I'm old enough to remember the USC, Texas, Auburn year where, Auburn was on the outside looking in and it was like, they're getting screwed and all that. The computers don't have the eye test and the subjectivity. And then now we have that. And then people are complaining, which that's part of the fun. But I worry about going too heavy into analytics and not watching the games, which is the concern I'd have with the committee now.
Right. Well, we're in a situation now where even if, say, Michigan pulls the upset on Saturday, it's not going to change the equation as far as Ohio State goes, no matter what they're still in. How has the expanded playoff changed the strategies of these teams as far as roster management throughout the season? And as far as really the emphasis that coaches have on games, for example, like even if they want to win every game, but it's in the NFL, they know they're not going to go 17-0 or whatever it is. They have goals to make the playoffs and have a chance to win at the end. But how do you see these strategies changing?
It's a great question. I think from a roster management standpoint, I get the sense that in November practices are a notch lighter than they would have been when I played, just because, it was kind of a full sprint to Thanksgiving this week. And then once you survive this week, all right, we'll figure out the bowl game and you got 3 weeks to rest. Versus if you're in contention, you're not building for Thanksgiving. You're building, hey, through Thanksgiving into Christmas. You're almost building towards Christmas kind of thing. And so it's a month that you have to orchestrate your roster differently. I think the scheduling piece is very interesting. I've said this a lot from a USC lens, in that if USC didn't have Notre Dame and they scheduled Colorado State instead, the optics around what last week was going into Oregon would have been a one-loss USC team that then loses on the road to Oregon, and then now you're a two-loss Big Ten team with it, again, no Notre Dame, but it would be Illinois and Oregon. The optics around that season, not only from a playoff perspective, but from a fan base and everything, is dramatically different than the 9-3 flavor that USC is currently on. So that, I think, fans are still adjusting to. And then I notice it, to answer your question directly, coaches in their press conferences, when I played, if you lost one game, you're still holding hope. But it's very much like the sky is fallen kind of thing. And then it's, you can't lose that second one or you're done. Now, I sense when you're watching those coaching pressers, it sounds more like an NFL press conference where if the Rams lose next week to a below 500 team, it's, this sucks, this is terrible, but we're not completely done. And nowadays with coaches, like, you can kind of give yourself two losses. And that's what gets back to our earlier point of, like, if a 10-2 SEC team were to get left out, that's a whole nother conversation. But there's more of a acceptance of, like, losing and stubbing your toe 1 week is kind of part of the process, whether or not fans want to hear that or not.
Yeah. And they're talking about expanding the system, not for 26, but maybe beyond to 16 teams or whatever it's going to be. So you're going to see that change again. Right now, teams are kind of aiming for 10-2. I think they'll probably be aiming for 9-3 down the road, right?
I hope the change doesn't happen. I'm against the expansion, because right now, I don't feel like the regular season has been impacted at all by the expansion. Like, I still think Ohio State, Michigan is still top of mind, still has the same juice. It might be a notch lower simply because the stakes of 10 years ago and what that meant. But still, like, right now, you're still playing for a bye week, for the chance to host a playoff game, or then go on the road. And there's still incentives to being 1 versus 5 versus 9, like huge incentives in that level. So I still think the college football regular season is phenomenal. You start going into 16, and then you're starting to get into that 9-3. That to me is the fork in the road where we would start to see the college football regular season get impacted. And I'm not in favor of that.
All right, let's go back to Lane Kiffin real quick. You know him from your playing days. You've got some insight at his personality. First, do you think he's going to go to Baton Rouge? And second, is he someone who is capable of settling down in a place like LSU long term? It seems to me that, does he have this end game in mind? It just doesn't seem clear to me. Like, what is this guy's goal?
Fascinating question. I mean, the Lane Kiffin I played for is a different man than the Lane Kiffin now. I mean, I say this point all the time. When Lane Kiffin was fired at USC, one of, if not the biggest criticism was, does he have the personality chops to manage a big-time program? Now he is literally the figurehead for what it means to have a personality-driven head coach in 2025, which is a total 180. I think it's interesting, though, because, if Kiffin was maybe 5 years older, 7 years older, he might be in the mindset of, hey, I got like one last stop and let me try to, build a statue at one program and ride off into the sunset. He still is young enough where I think he's still in, let's push the envelope mode. Let's see what we can accomplish. Let's see. We have enough runway here where we can like truly build can chase all-time legacy and all that. To me, I do think when push comes to shove, I think he's going to go to LSU. I have no personal insight there, but I just think if you're Lane Kiffin, he has the awareness and he's lived it firsthand where these windows of opportunity where you are the date that everyone wants to take to the dance. It is very rare for this to happen. It's very rare for a top 5. LSU is, no questions asked, a top 5 job in college football. You could make the argument a top 3 job in college football. These windows don't come around often. I think LSU being in the SEC, slower pace of life, I think all that stuff is truthful to Kiffin, and he still can accomplish it there. And I think Kiffin's between a rock and a hard place. Anyone that like knows ball knows that he's not a scumbag for doing this. It's just a byproduct of the college football calendar, and he's doing what a lot of these coaches would do. Just his history is obviously complicated, which then muddies this whole situation of he obviously left Tennessee for USC in ugly terms. But that is the one factor I do think, if in the back of his mind, I do think it's genuine in that he doesn't want to have that Tennessee to USC chapter and backlash again. but it might just be inevitable given the scenario he unfortunately finds himself in.
Yeah, you mentioned his personality changing. It seems to me that he's become more like his dad, Monty, who was quite the character, right?
Yeah, I was around Monty just a little bit, but yeah, I just think he's more loose. The air's lighter around him. Like that wasn't
Mm,
necessarily the case at USC, and I think now he's lived through probably what was his worst nightmare, getting fired at USC and having that thing all blow up, and he's like not taking it as seriously.
mm,
But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, or taking himself as seriously, I should say. I wouldn't be surprised if he stays at Ole Miss. That's for sure. Different era. I mean, it's well documented that program prestige is not as important of a factor as it was 10 years ago.
mm-hmm.
The most important factor is, are your boosters donating money? And if
Yeah.
Ole Miss, by all accounts, has that money, so he certainly can win at the highest level there.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little Heisman now. There are 4 spots available for Heisman finalists. It seems like Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin likely have locked down a couple of the spots. Who do you think are the best bets to get the other 2 spots to New York?
Other 2 spots, yeah, I mean, I like Marcel Reed, and then I like Diego Pavia to get that third and fourth spot. And then after that, to me, there's a significant drop. Right now, I'm in the camp that it's very much Fernando Mendoza's to lose there. But I do think Marcel Reed and the story that A&M has been this year, people forget, but Reed had a little bit of a Heisman moment there in the fourth quarter versus Notre Dame, that game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. That, to me, is noteworthy there. And then LSU, obviously, that LSU has gotten worse since the A&M loss. But what he did on a national stage with his legs and big-time playing there, I think Reed deserves an invite. And then Pavia, the story, well documented. To me, the most impressive part is he backed it all up. Like I kind of thought last year was a one-hit wonder, and man, it's going to be hard to do that 2 years in a row just because Vandy's not going to sneak up on anybody. Pavia's not going to sneak up on anybody. And he's backed it up, and Vandy's a hell of a story. I think Pavia deserves an invite.
Very interesting. If Indiana and Ohio State take care of business Saturday, they will meet again the following week in the Big Ten title game, Mendoza versus Sayin. Do you think that game could determine the Heisman winner?
I think it could. I don't think it should, though. I mean, to me, what's working against Julian Sayin, and if I was a Heisman voter, why I would not vote for Julian Sayin, is he was eased into this year.
Hmm.
And to me, if you're winning the Heisman Trophy, you shouldn't have a ease in chapter. Like all of September, that offense very much had training wheels on Julian Sayin. And it was right for that team, and it was right for Julian Sayin's development as a quarterback, but it's not right to win the Heisman Trophy. And you look at just how they were playing, it was very, let's ease our young quarterback into the season. Versus for Mendoza, it's go time from the jump. For Pavia, go time from the jump. Marcel Reed, same exact thing. So that's my stance. It reminds me of, like when Steph Curry had Kevin Durant on his team, like right away, I'm thinking Steph Curry should never win the MVP. That's just the reality of the Warriors situation there. For Julian Sayin, you got 2 potentially first-round NFL receivers, arguably the best, most talented player in college football right next to you. Julian Sayin's a great quarterback, but I think those factors work against him in 2025.
And also, he's a redshirt freshman. Voters might think, well, we can vote for him next year. He's coming back for sure, right?
Or they might have like voter fatigue from Ohio State. They won the national title. They always have a great quarterback. Hey, Mendoza, Pavia, Marcel Reed. We haven't had. I mean, I won't put Reed in that family as much. But like the Vandy, Indiana story from voters that are like, oh, we don't want another Ohio State or Bama guy in this conversation. I think that could work against Sayin.
Of course, if either Mendoza or Reed, or not Reed, but Pavia were to win, that'd be the first Heisman for those schools. But looking ahead at next year, which teams are best positioned to make a run at things in 26, do you think?
Baby, it'll all come down to portal, obviously, and who can land, big time quarterbacks. I mean, I couldn't even give you a straight answer because of how mobile the portal's going to be. I mean, I do think teams like Ole Miss, teams like Texas Tech, I think their investment is not going anywhere. USC, if Maava was able to come back, I think is interesting. Oregon's not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, you got to follow the player movement. And what's most intriguing to me is teams like a Florida or team like a Auburn or team like a LSU that says, man, we're sick and tired of being on the outside looking in, and they get a booster who's got a chip on their shoulder to say, hey, let's go get Jared and Kiave Sagapolatele, and let's go get the best tackle and right tackle in the college football. And because of the recent frustration, then they double down on NIL and kind of come out of nowhere? Those ones are always intriguing to me.
Well, Max Browne, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate your insight. Everyone out there, be sure to check out his YouTube channel. Great stuff there. He'll be calling North Carolina and NC State this weekend. Going to talk to Belichick soon, aren't you?
Yeah, just before my Thanksgiving dinner with my in-laws. It'll be fun. It's a tough season for Bill, but we'll see if we can get something out of him.
Awesome. Max Browne, one of the rising analysts in broadcasting today. Happy Thanksgiving, Max.
Thanks, Chris. Happy Thanksgiving.